Greetings, everybody, and welcome to my channel, All That Is. I'm so excited to be here today with my guest, Missy Hill. Missy and I guess we met on IndigoAngel's channel, and we've been doing like roundtables since then. I guess since the beginning of the year, right, Missy?
Yes, yeah, and then a
So
little bit last
yeah,
year. Yeah,
yeah. So
yeah.
welcome to the show, Missy.
Well, thank you so much, Raquel, for having me on. And we were discussing Arthur, so I figured I would show everybody. This is Arthur, my Arthur,
Hi,
Arthur,
Arthur.
Arthor, because Arthur also is a follower of like the bear. It means to do with the bear constellation, and Thor, Thor's hammer and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's why he's got both names, because he is like a ball of thunder in a way, the way he moves. And
Nice.
actually, I'd say he's the reincarnation of my cat Soda, who was a female orange tabby who went on the road with us when we were truck drivers. And she lived to be 19. And Lisa Renee did a few newsletters about Arthur, and I read that back. I don't remember, that was a few years back. There was this one, and when I read that newsletter, I actually knew that he was coming when my friend that had kittens said, "There's an orange boy cat." I got the whole download that this was Soda returning to us, at least in partial, not in totality, because their personalities are a little different, and they were working on the Michael ley lines, because Soda did the grid work with us when we were over the road. So she
Oh,
was the
wow.
female version. Even though she was female, she was more masculine. See, I love to work with pets too, because when I've done readings and healing work, I've also done a lot with pets, and what's interesting about that is when you're working with people's pets, it actually tells you a lot about their owner.
Yeah. Well, I'm a cat person too, but unfortunately, the place that I live in, the homeowner doesn't allow cats or any pets for that matter. So I miss that. I miss having a cat. But yeah, I'm so glad you have that. You have that, ability to, first of all, communicate with them on an interdimensional level and, have them in your reality, if you will, as the energy that they're manifesting within, right? And so, Missy, I want to get to know you on a deeper level, and just to get to know who Missy is all about. And we get to talk about politics, and we go on gridwork missions together. But I'd like to go into um, you know where Missy is in terms of her spiritual guidance and how you came about to first of all being a healer, a grid worker. So if you want to take us down memory lane, if you will, a bit, and just give us a little bit of your background and how you got started on this path of ascension, if you will.
Well, I actually realized I didn't have the terminology for it, but I became a psychic grid reader in the year 2000, when I was actually told to go on the road to be a truck driver. And the way that happened, I've spoke a little bit about this on other shows before, but this gives you some framework and background for people that don't know me. Is I was in Florida when I met my husband, which was in 1998, and we married ourselves under the full moon in Linville, and was witnessed by the little people, the little sprites, the little fairy realm of lights in the Linville area, which is Linville's also the home of the Brown Mountain Lights. If anybody knows about the Brown Mountain Lights, that people will see these balls of light between Table Rock and Hawksbill in the Linville Gorge area. This wasn't actually in the gorge, and I didn't even know about the lights. It was a place called Linville Land Harbor where his mother lived at the time. And when we left Florida at that time, we moved to Georgia because he got a job with a company called Holox, where he used to drive the tanker trucks. And we were actually living in a campground in Fort Yargo, which was in Winder, Georgia. And at that time, I had found my cat Soda, who I talked about before. I didn't know a cat soul was coming, but she kind of screamed at me through this other cat. And then I knew a cat was going to be coming, and I happened to find her behind a soda machine in the town where those infamous Georgia Guidestones were, called Elberton, Georgia. And after being there for a few months, there was a day, sometimes you have these days that are so memorable that they're surreal and they stand out among other days. And I happened to be playing with the Rand McNally map because I used to love those type of maps, because this is before, GPS, although we did have a GPS in our truck. It was called a Qualcomm, which would tell you where to go, but it wasn't like having, GPS on your cell phone or anything like this. We just didn't do it. You used the real map. And I was playing with my pendulum because I'm also a dowser. And I was looking at a map of the four corners, and I actually heard Spirit say to me, "You're going to go over the road to do grid work." And I'm like, I didn't even kind of know what that was. But that day, I was also watching somebody do falconry. They had the glove, the whole thing. So it was a hawk that was flying around. I'm thinking, oh, bird's eye view. Cool. Look at this. And then I told my husband. So then we went to truck driving school, or I did. He already drove, and went over the road. And that started my Indigo One contract. I mean, previous to that, I had memories of Atlantis. I was always spiritual, but I was involved in the world when I was, younger. But as a young kid, it was, the thing for me was ghosts. Like going to my grandmother's house in my great grandma's mother's house in New Jersey, and knowing that somebody died in the house. I felt their spirit in the attic, that they even had the funeral in the house, things like this. And I was just, creeped out by this kind of thing. I could just feel that stuff, and it seemed to follow me, and I would just become aware of spirits, and end up doing land clearings and things like this, not really trying to do it. And then later on, I started getting more of a framework for what I was actually doing, understanding that I can go to a place and I can hear them. I mean, it was interesting, like during 9/11, when I was in Westfield, New Jersey, where my grandmother lives, I was having dreams of the people that died and helping them cross over. So these kinds of things.
Wow, that's amazing. So you can actually see or hear these beings, or you just become aware of them?
Well, in the dream state, it's like you're in the astral with them.
Okay.
You're not in the waking state. This is in the dream state. And it doesn't happen all the time. It happens when it needs to happen. So I think on some level, whatever I do, I'm like the jack of all trade type of weird indigo, whatever, that does a little bit of everything. Like the Indigo One is primarily the the grid worker, or the take it up a notch, it's like a psychic grid reader or grid hunter, or the keeper of the grid, the keeper of the stargates, that kind of thing. The two is like the healing work, and that's like when I went to massage school, because I did go to massage school, had my Reiki Reiki and all these different things, doing hands-on healing. But then I decided I didn't like, it's not that I didn't like it, I didn't want to touch people all the time because I would take their stuff on, being an empath. And then the three is that polarity integrator, and this is like colonic science stuff. That polarity integrator a lot of times is like sharing their body with a fallen angelic. They're like hosting them to help them rehabilitate that. And I've known people that have had that, and I've experienced even a little of that Indigo 3, but I kind of tell, higher ups, my higher self, them, say, what I resonate with most is just being a grid worker, and I'll do the healing through that. But it's like about conserving my energy, so I'm not like spread all over the place with that.
Okay, great. And so growing up, did you grow up in like a spiritual environment, like or a particular religious environment?
No, not really. I mean, Christianity later, and I had some friends, when I was in college and things, like Buddhism was presented to me, and I was always looking and never satisfied. Always felt like, I just wanted the truth, and I couldn't really find it anywhere. And it was just like, and I tried, I tried different churches and different things, and I would stay in these places for a little while. It's like going in to retrieve a little bit of codex or something and then get out of Dodge as quick as you can, because you don't want to get stuck in it, because that's what happens to people. They get stuck, and there's what you call a frequency fence, and you just can't go beyond. You try to go vertical, and then there's that glass ceiling, and where are you going to go? So you start going out.
Yeah.
And that's like a lot of what goes on in like the New Age spiritual communities,
Yeah.
which I
Awesome.
did the New Age stuff too, and wasn't satisfied there either. I did the Native American stuff. None of it really resonated until when I went on the road. And when we were on the road as truck drivers, we used to listen to Art Bell. And then if you know anything about Coast to Coast AM and George Norrie, this is where Rob and I have that connection, because he was a big Art Bell fan. And, through that, I was introduced to a lot of different people to find things out about, truth, even though, as a kid, I also never resonated with politics either. I thought it was like fake, like both sides are controlled kind of by the same thing, sort of like what David Icke says. And I found about David Icke on Coast, all these different people. Graham Hancock, Fingerprint of the Gods. I loved Marion Zimmer Bradley's The Mists of Avalon, even though that was, fiction, and read, the metaphysical things, Edgar Casey, this kind of stuff, Dan Millman. And I'm just trying to think,
That's awesome. Like, I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with a lot of the American landscape, if you will, but I'll probably get an education from you as we go through this process. But no, that's awesome. I just wanted to know what resonated with you then finally in a way that connected you to those higher energies or to your higher self, or I guess to the creator, if you will.
When I started having memories of things, like when you start having memories of being in caves, or you start having memories of, say, what you feel is Ireland, you can read a book and then you feel like you're there and you have these memories, or even being in Fort Lauderdale, Miami, feeling like Atlantean timelines. And this was, people have always been talking about Atlantis, because Donovan wrote that song about Atlantis, way down under the ocean, these kinds of things. Lemuria, just knowing somewhere this fit in my template, but I didn't understand how. But one thing that really did it was, even though I'm not a proponent necessarily of Zachariah Sitchin, this was before I knew about, Ashiana Dean's work, right? The 12th Planet. My grandmother had those books. There was a book called The Lost Book of Enki that I was actually trying to order from a Barnes and Noble, because this was before Amazon, of course, and I couldn't find it. And I end up being out in Salt Lake City, and it falls off of a shelf, and I start reading this stuff about Tiamat. And one time when I was in North Carolina, in the Hot Springs area, which is where I live when I'm not in Edisto, South Carolina. I'm pretty much, I go back and forth between North Carolina and South Carolina. I'm actually in Cherokee, North Carolina right now. But when we were taking a hike and I was picking some wild strawberries, I went into this whole remote viewing type of thing, of feeling Tiamat, and that I was connected to this body, if you will. And I would even write and channel the planets as beings. And the way you would think of that now, I think there was a Marvel movie. I'm trying to think which one it was, but it wasn't that long ago. I mean, I like to see these sometimes for frame of reference, but it was like this planet was like a Titan type of being, and all these beings were living on top of it. And for it to live, it had to, like, it would almost have to kill the beings that were living on it for it to survive. And it was just crazy, some of this stuff that I was seeing and feeling about, like, and feeling what they call the celestial bombardment of the war of these planets like Marduk, Maldek, and how the hammered bracelet was formed, with all this collision, which is our Milky Way galaxy. I knew something was just not what were told about our Earth and how we were created. And I mean, and that was just the beginning, because now my feeling is, the victors of war are usually the ones that write these stories down, and we end up worshiping as humans the ones that have captured us, which doesn't make any sense. Instead of claiming our own divine birthright, that we are God's sovereign, free human being connected directly to God's source.
Wow, thank you for that. Yeah. Yeah, it's quite amazing, isn't it? When you come from that perspective, there's so much garbage, if you will, that's been thrown at us. Like, how do you sift through all of that and find your true authentic self, and which path is it that you need to follow in order to get to that truth, if you will, right? Yeah. It's quite amazing how each one takes that path. So just coming back to your beautiful singing voice, I hadn't heard you sing before, so have you done anything like in public?
Oh yeah, I did. Well, I would probably, before COVID, I have a friend that I would have been we were playing, and I just actually bought a new guitar the other day because I went to a guitar show. It's a Fender Malibu. It's an acoustic guitar, but I wanted something just a little smaller that was like easy on your hands, easy to take around, doesn't weigh much. I did a bunch of karaoke recently on a cruise, but when I was younger, I played in bands and things, but it's just more for fun. But I mean, I think I'm better than a campfire, probably like for going to like a bar or something, like, you know what I mean? Or
That's
whatever,
awesome.
somewhere like, or a campfire or whatever,
Yeah. Wow,
and
that's amazing.
it's fun. It's fun to do. But yeah, when I was on that cruise, I did like 6 or 7 karaoke songs one night, because I feel I have to use my voice, because my throat chakra was blocked for a few years. I mean, just recently with these eclipses. Oh, and we're getting ready to have some other eclipse, I think on the 13th with the full moon. Did you
Yes.
hear that? Yeah.
Yes, I did. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's going to be probably another interesting energies.
Well, it's happening at full speed now, right? It's coming at us from all different angles, right? And so we have to be
All different
prepared
angles.
for all of these things.
Yeah.
So going back to grid work and your work with how you've been working on the grid. So you said you and your husband were truck drivers, and how did that manifest into you working with the grids? And I guess what I'm trying to get at is, how did you figure out that this was what you were meant to do, and how was your like sort of connection, if you will, if you like say we're driving from North Carolina to South Carolina, like how would you go about doing a grid mission or a
Well,
healing of
what
that
in
energy?
those days, it's a lot of like north, south, east, west. So if you're going, say, east, west, it would be I-40 a lot of times. It runs through, runs through North Carolina, runs through Tennessee, runs through, I think parts of Arkansas, goes through Arizona, New Mexico, Arizona, all the way to California. If you're going through Colorado, you're doing 70. I mean, I kind of remember in my mind, like going from Phoenix to Flagstaff in a day, and Sedona and different things, and the places would make me feel. That's kind of, and the synchronicities that would happen. So some of the synchronicities like that stand out. Here's another one: of being on the Great Salt Lake, the flats of it, when I'm so tired after no sleep. I mean, it wasn't a healthy lifestyle, and that's why we stopped doing it, and then we couldn't drive as a team anymore, because a team means that they want you to keep the wheels rolling pretty much 24/7. Like maybe 20 hours a day of driving, that's just too much. So what happened was, after a year or so, my husband did the driving and I just rode, so that way we could travel and see the whole country. And I'm telling you, we made it to 47 out of 48 states in the 3 years we did this. And the only
Wow.
state we didn't make it to was Vermont, and we had been there before. I didn't even understand the impact of what grid work was until getting off the road, when I could let it sit. And especially now with these remote missions and things, because I don't need to have a computer. I mean, I need to learn scribbles and I need to learn this tech stuff, but I see it here without writing it down and having to remember it. I mean, I'm trying to write a book and stuff. I need to learn how to use AI stuff because I've been looking for a ghostwriter. I'm like, I would like someone to be my ghostwriter to write my stories. Are you a ghostwriter?
I could be.
Talk. Let's talk about this, because I have a story to tell through the eyes of my cat and through this one that is the reincarnation and my other cat. But the implications of after, and you can know how the dots connect, like kind of feeling in the one grid work mission that we did with Indy last year. I kind of bet that Mount Shasta or Lake Shasta is on the same line as the Statue of Liberty. And I look it up and I'm close. So the way I used to do it is I would just type in coordinates all the time. I would say, what are the coordinates? So use Google Map. So yeah, just kind of looking at things that way and knowing where they are. Or like I-10 is another one, and remembering what it looks like going through. There's a part of Arizona off of I-10 that it just looks like somebody threw a bunch of rocks, a bunch of big boulders. I'm telling you, it looks like from the antediluvian world, or like something happened all at once or over time, kind of like when you're going to the Grand Canyon and the way it was carved. I mean, some of these places out west, the way they look, it's unbelievable. There was a cataclysmic thing. Even in Western North Carolina here, on the border of Western North Carolina and Tennessee, there's a hiking trail that connects into the Smoky Mountain National Park. And it's actually Duke Energy, which is our energy company, they make electricity there, right? And you can take this trail. And Mama Earth started talking to me. I'm thinking, why is this thing here, with Duke Energy? I'm getting like, sometimes they make agreements, like they allow that to be here. It's not benevolent or malevolent. It's kind of like a neutral thing, because people will become aware of stuff just from walking in there. And it's one of these things that when you walk this hiking trail, you can hear the singing of the water through the rocks, and it echoes, and you feel like you're in this. It's very spiritual, interdimensional. Like, it definitely connects to inner earth passageways. This trail, I'm trying to remember what the name of this trail is. I'm sure I'll remember, but it's like one that people don't know about. But I just love it because these rocks are huge. That some that look like turtles, and with the faces and all that stuff. Like when they went to Kauai, I mean, there's a lot of places that have these guardians in the rocks. In New Mexico, I've experienced it. I've experienced it in Arizona. I mean, there's so many beautiful places. Another beautiful place I love is Meteor Crater. When I went to Meteor Crater, if people think the moon landings were fake with that whole Stanley Kubrick thing, like people say, he admitted to staging things for the moon landings. It looks like Meteor Crater is where they did it. I'm telling you. And you go there, and it's like a vacuum of nothingness where you hear nothing. And when you hear nothing, you hear a loud ringing in your ears. It's so quiet that it becomes loud with what's going on inside of you.
Wow, that's crazy, hey? Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Wow, that sounds amazing, Missy. So it's like you're a walking encyclopedia, hey?
Some have say that, yeah. They called me also like a paranormal historian.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you definitely need to write a book. But let's
Yeah, I
chat
know.
about that after. Yeah,
Yeah,
I'd like to pick your brains about that I have written 2 books, so I don't know if you've heard about that, but yeah, I've
Yeah,
got
I
some.
haven't looked at it yet. My life has been kind of chaotic. So I'm thrust into even more travel again. And you know what people say to us? You're never at home, are you? You're always on the go. And I'm not trying to orchestrate this. This is just happening, since Helene. And that was another thing. I'm also a tour guide. So I used to do the Biltmore Village Mystery Tour, which is part of Haunted Asheville. It's a historical, ghostly mystery tour, which is also spiritual because I'm able to bring certain things forward that connects, to the Vanderbilt, George Vanderbilt and the land that he owned and the land of Western North Carolina that's now the Blue Ridge Parkway that the Vanderbilts owned, the first forestry school, which was in Brevard, North Carolina. George Vanderbilt brought a man named Robert Schenk over from Germany, and that's where the first forestry school was. If to give you an example, if you went from the Biltmore estate to Brevard, that would be about 7.5 hours on horseback. Not a ride my butt would want to take, that's for
Oh,
sure.
wow. Yeah,
But
that's far.
but due to Helene, that tour is no more. And I used to talk about in the tour when I would go to the church, which is an Anglican Episcopal church that was commissioned and built by George Vanderbilt called All Souls Cathedral, I would talk about the Great Flood of 1916, which last year was 108 years ago. And that to me, that's important because there's 108 beads on a mala, so I always think 108 and it's part of that 144. It's in that 144 sequence. And oh, by the way, I have 144 on my license plate and I never orchestrated it. It just showed up. But so I would tell about that great flood of 1916. And then 108 years later, we had the great flood of 2024 from Hurricane Helene. And that was even much worse. So since then, it seems like my grid work has gone through the roof of, yeah, I went to Arkansas last year, but it seems like I'm now also going to be going to Florida more too, because Ron's family's there. And I
And
used
what
to live
is
in Florida, but I hadn't been to Florida since 2018
okay.
until January of this year.
And what
And
does
that's
your
because,
husband make of all of this?
well, he's doing it too.
Oh, okay. All right. So
Yeah.
he's a sensitive as well.
Yeah, he does things differently, and he actually runs what's called a hip camp business. Hip camp is for glampers. It's like Airbnb, but if somebody has an RV or tiny home type of thing. We also live in a tiny home because we built a house that's a Deltec that's hurricane proof that we were supposed to rent out, but due to the COVID mess, everything changed, and we are not renting that house out. So my heart loves the Western North Carolina better. I feel much more connected to the mountains and the grids here than I feel with coastal energy. It's just, it's also very hot and humid in the summer months.
Right. So when you travel, like, are you traveling on work or are you just accompanying your husband on these work tours, if you
Well,
will?
right now it's because my father's health is not that great, and he is in Hot Springs, North Carolina. So I'm going to be going back and forth, and some of it is work. Yes, I do the festival scene. There's different festivals, and like last year I was part of the Appalachian Starseed reunion. So it's just different things like that.
Okay, wonderful.
Yeah.
And so you guys have a camper within which you travel, or you just go in your truck?
We go in the cars, and the camper is for when people stay with us, either friends or family, or renting it out in this hip camp. So and it's a lot of people that come to South Carolina that are from North Carolina. So it's kind of like the thing with the connection of the grids between North and South Carolina was at one time it was just called the Carolinas. It wasn't North and South Carolina, it was just the Carolinas.
Okay.
So it's
And so
like
you
going
also
back.
do healing work, right, Missy?
Yeah, I do. I haven't been doing as much of it, but I do something called the quantum infinity. And I do this on an iPad. And what this is like programs. You can write programs of whatever it is you want to work on. Like if, say, I mean, it comes with programs that are written into it, but say you want to, lose weight, you can, and I don't make any claims. I don't diagnose, treat, or prescribe. It's a theoretical practice for entertainment and educational purposes only. But
Okay.
what it is, it's supplemental for you to write your supplements to help you not want to eat so much. Or you don't even have to do that. You could say you want crystals, you want the energy of crystals, or you want the energy of uh, essential oils or flower essences, or you want to do implant removal. The sky's the limit what you can do. I mean, I even wrote it one for a flea program called Fleas Be Gone. Now, I would not say that I would say 100% make anything, but what you would do is you would get the fleas off of the animal first through bathing, or if they have to take one round of that stuff to kill all the parasites, the larvae, and all that stuff for like 3 months, and then after that you run that, and then it doesn't come back.
Is it like a frequency generator machine?
It works on frequency, and yes, frequency comes out of it, but it's actually, you could do it off of an iPad. It seems to run best with Apple software, as opposed to, it will work with Android. But yeah, I could do a demo on here sometime if you would like, where I could
Yeah, that would
run
be,
it.
because
Yeah.
I use what is called a Spooky 2 machine, but it's a frequency generator machine.
Yep.
And yeah, it's programmable, but it also works um, physically as well as remotely. So you can like hook yourself up with tense pads and have those frequencies run through your body for whatever illness or whatever it is that you want to receive in your body. And it could be anything, like you said, like crystals or essential oils. Even like if you want to receive those frequencies in your body, you can program it that way and receive it. But this one works both physically as well as remotely. And for the remote stuff, you need to put in like a DNA sample, if you will, into the receptacle. So it's like a fingernail or blood or a piece of hair or something like that.
Yeah, I'm familiar
Um,
with Spooky too. My father has
yeah,
one, and I used to have a Rife machine. So I
yeah,
had the big Rife machine that I got, I wanted to sell because I had the big light bulb and that whole thing. I'm like, I didn't want that anymore. But I also do radionics, and that's simple with what just a radionics box, and that works, too, for certain things. Maybe not as specific as a Spooky too, though, with the saliva or hair sample. Yeah, that's great. I love that, all that stuff, that
yeah.
frequency.
It's really fascinating, isn't it? And
Yeah,
yeah,
it is.
I went into it quite deeply last year when um, I think I've got it now for at least 2 years. But then I had some time last year, and so I went into a deep research about it, and I actually helped a friend who was struggling with alcohol, and
Uh,
we managed to kick that habit, if you will. And it was a really surreal experience for her. So I went and visited her, and we did like a meditation first, and then I hooked her up onto the machine, and we went into another deeper meditation while she was connected to the machine. And during that meditation, she saw this energy, if you will, that looks like the beast in the movie. I think it's Cinderella, right? You have that big beast-like um, creature that they show in the movie. Anyway, she said it looked something like one of those creatures,
wow.
and this energy came in, and it just shattered into a million pieces in her third eye vision. And she never touched alcohol after that. Um,
Wow.
but that was pretty powerful. So yeah, sometimes these things work, it's as if it's meant to be for some people, and it calls to some people to work with these sort of modalities. So that was really interesting. So I thought I'd mention that since we were talking about this subject, right?
Yeah, and I've done the tarot and the herbs, and a lot of different, modalities.
Yeah, yeah.
I call them modalities of different
And so when you
things.
go on these gridwork missions, if you will, with Indy, how do you sort of prepare in a way to go into these gridwork missions? And I mean, I've been with you on a couple of these missions, and I think you're like bang on to, whatever we've been doing, and so I'm just curious as to how it is you relate to the land, and how do you go about bringing those energies forward? Like, are you seeing it as it's happening? Are you seeing it as like geometric figures, or are you
Well, I'm
seeing
seeing it as
visions?
it's happening sometimes with some of the dots I've already seen. I mean, some of these pieces I've been working on for years, like with Charleston. Okay, I mean, I guess I'm mostly working on the East Coast because I'm on the East Coast. So I became really aware of this in 2013 when I went to Puerto Rico with my friend Joshua P. Warren, who was a regular on Coast to Coast, who actually shares the same birthday as Indy. I'm not going to say what the date is, but he shared the same birthday. I think that's funny. Scorpios. I'm also
Okay.
Scorpio. But what happened when I was in Puerto Rico, I went to San Cristo Ball. It's interesting what it's called. And if I studied the history, about Christopher Columbus, about the removal of the Taino Indians, which is similar like within Western North Carolina with the removal of the Cherokee Indians. Ponce de Leon's body's remains is on display. All this kind of stuff. The guy with the El Mosquito, oh, my kitty's meowing in the background. But when I went to the San Cristo Ball, I was getting this download at the La Garita del Diablo, which means the Devil's Watchtower. I was seeing the Bermuda Triangle, and the 3 points of the Bermuda Triangle is the tip of Miami, this La Garita del Diablo, and Bermuda. And when I'm seeing these iguanas, it's like they're talking to me inside my head. Like something is speaking through them. They're all laying there out in the sun. And I'm hearing it's a collective of the goddess Inanna, which is an Anunnaki goddess. And I'm like, I don't subscribe to the Anunnaki. Why are you talking to me? And they're saying, because we're under patriarchal domination. Just because we're Anunnaki doesn't mean we agree with the patriarch, because we've just been held hostage too. And then what was shown in my inner vision, I was getting the thing that the Bermuda Triangle was weaponized plasma. They reversed the spin, and then they showed me, and maybe it's part of me. When I say they, it could be, we're all everything, right? So it's a step down of energy. I was wondering about the goddess Pele. That's what my connection was instantly. Pele, a Hawaiian volcano, is the scorned woman, because I was thinking, what is a scorned woman? She's a bitch, right? When she's scorned. And that's kind of the way these grids are. They have been raped, pillaged, and plundered. Recently, I've seen that the Bermuda Triangle is actually a Lemurian birthing center. I'm getting more pieces as with India and the grid work and things like that. That was also the time when I was an advocate for the land when I was in Puerto Rico. When I was taking a walk in the San Juan area, there was this old church, and I felt, because it's like one of these things, remote viewing. I would not say I am skilled in remote viewing, that I can go in like what's the remote viewer's name, Ron? You know his name. Ed Dames, like Major Ed Dames, and I'm going to target a certain location, and we're going to go in and we're going to remote view and look for this child that's been abducted. If I am meant to do that piece, I will see it. If I'm not meant to do it, I don't set out to do any of this. I show up, and if it's given to me to do, then I can remote view and feel and this and that. And what actually happened when I was there was, it was like collective of beings told me that they willingly bound themselves to the land until an advocate showed up for them to be witnessed so they could move on. Like, they wanted me to know that they loved this land, and they stayed behind because they want the truth to come out. And the same thing has actually happened in Charleston. I'll get into that in a minute. So that happened at this one place. And then we went in another church and it had the checkerboard floor. And you know about checkerboard floors.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
black and white and the checkerboard matrix and all that stuff. Well, they had the dead bodies in this church, you know, like the crypt where they buried the people right inside the church. Very creepy. I was hearing somebody say that was like dark, not fun, not a good being. They're saying that they want the men that I'm with, and I'm with my husband, I'm with Joshua and another guy who's, I can't think of his name right now, native of Puerto Rico. And I said, no, you cannot have these men. You're not allowed to take them. You're not allowed. And this same kind of thing happened to me in Ireland at graveyards, you know, where in Charleston a few years back. I mean, I'm trying to think when that was. It wasn't the first time I went to Fort Sumter. Actually, the first time I went to Fort Sumter was in 2015 or 16. I think it's 15. It was in May of 2015. I knew then that they did something to Fort Sumter. It's actually an artificial island, but they made it even though I get the area is feminine, right? Because it's part of the Bermuda Triangle. They masculinize it. They do war codes on it. I knew then in 2015 that because that's where the shots of the Civil War were fired, that it held war codes. Because I've been to so many battlefields, it seems like I end up at battlefields. I don't even look for them. Like when I was on the road in Virginia, we end up going to a Starbucks to get coffee, and it turns out that we're parked and we end up going take a walk around the back of the building. This is when Barnes and Noble's Starbucks used to be in Barnes and Noble, and I love books, like old bookstores, you know, which you don't see that many Barnes and Noble anymore. So we walked around and I said, oh my God, I feel like I'm standing on a mass grave. I come back after the hike. Oh, and I didn't even know I was in a national park. I didn't even know I was in Manassas National Park until I walked around, because I didn't come in through the entrance. We walked in the back way. I opened a book and I turned to the very page that talks about the Battle of Manassas. So I have a lot of weird synchronicity that happens, and that's how I track what I'm doing. It's kind of like through the language of synchronicities, of things just showing up in the way that they do.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And so, through your travels, have you encountered or come into the realization of, like, directly in terms of what the Draco are and this whole invasion story, if you will?
Well, I don't know if I called them the Draco. I see them as the Draco, and I've read about them as the Draco, but that was shown to me as vampires under the ground, that they're like, yeah, they are Draco, but they're like this vampiric energy where they are harvesting loose energy. They're staying there, and they're, when people do ceremonies at certain places, they're under the ground and they're actually collecting the energy from the people that are doing whatever ceremonies. And I was aware of that in Puerto Rico. I was aware of that doing a grid mission with another woman where we do it kind of quietly, prayers and things. I did some other things with her publicly too when Star Knowledge came to Asheville, but it was in the Sedona area. I was like, oh my God, there's vampires under the ground in Sedona. And I'm getting that a lot of like these ascended masters and people they think are so wonderful may not be so wonderful, because they're harvesting energy from people. Okay. But some of them are actually also being held against their will. Like they want to move on. If they've been there for 1,000 years or more of our time, they're like, you know, they've done a job and they want to move on. They don't want to do it. They're like, you know, and remember the devil card in the tarot. These people are in chains, right? But they're not really in chains. They could take the chains off, you know, but that card represents really materialism, that we are held captive to this material world. We are, so it's an illusion here, yet it's so tactile and real that we just get caught up in it. And I think even with these bad ones, it's still, in a way, we like to say it's light and dark, it's good and bad, it's right and left, it's up and down, it's inside and outside, it's masculine, feminine, it's all one from the whole perspective of it. But from down here, it is those separations, and we're trying to bring it back, like the Hermetic laws, with the pendulum swing, that's the swing of the left is equal to the swing of the right. And then you have like the law of masculine, feminine, you have the law of temperature, where if you go, so much one way, it gets colder, so much one way, gets hotter. Or if it's dark, you start adding light, and you get the spectrum of light is one extreme. And then we have all this polarization here, it's and it's like, how do we, so that's, I kind of see it more from that way. And because I'm not one that really feels comfortable calling on entities, because I've had bad experiences with them. I've tried to do it. It doesn't seem to work for me to call on entities, except for like God, source, first, eternal, except for the ones that I know, like my own cats and things that have passed on, and I just have a trust in the moment that if I get out of the way of the Missy personality, gets out of the way, something's going to come through me.
Can you go back to the comment you just made about ascended masters? Like you said, they were trapped here. Can you expand on that?
I think they're trapped in certain dimensions, possibly, that may be, and I'm not saying the whole person, okay, because I think there's soul fragmentations, and just like we could have parts of our soul in the third dimension, or we could have it in the seventh dimension, or we could have it in the anti-particle realm. Maybe that's what's going on with these ascended masters. So when people are actually calling on ascended master, I'm going to pick on Saint Germain, because this is the one that really bothers me, because I've seen the vampire version of it. When people use the misuse of this violet flame, maybe they are actually creating their own tulpa. So the real person, and was this person Francis Bacon, and was this person Shakespeare? I don't know. Some people say that the Saint Germain may actually live in New Orleans and is a vampire there. I don't know. But I'm saying what people call on may be a tulpa. I'll give you an example. I think when you go to Graceland in Memphis, Tennessee, I'm going to Graceland,
Yeah.
I think when you go there and you feel Elvis's spirit, it may not be Elvis. It may be an egregore or a tulpa that people have created with their own thoughts and emotions, with a little bit of Elvis spirit, and they're saying, and they're summoning it. They're saying it's the ghost. It's the ghost that people have created. Just like when people look at a crucifix of Yeshua, that's not Yeshua. Definitely not.
Yeah.
That is definitely not Yeshua on a cross with impaled with nails. I don't think so.
Yeah.
I
So
know
it's like
for
a
a fact.
holographic impression, if you will, right? That's created through the energy or the belief systems. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, I
So
totally get
this
it.
is the problem that I have with ascended masters, and why I don't like to really, when people start doing that, I'll be there with them, but in my own self, I'm not aligning with, I'm calling on this, because I think it's call on your own higher self, because you are that ascended master too, maybe in a different way. And I'm not saying in a way from ego, I'm saying when you are all that is, right, then you're all that is, and you're a piece of that all that is, you're that light. And to know that innately, that doesn't mean we 100% live that. That's the whole thing. We want to live what we aspire to be every moment, right? Because we shouldn't be unconscious or subconscious. I know that that's a distortion. The brain hemispheres being separated, need to be one. We should not be subconscious or unconscious at all.
Well, that's interesting because I channel Yeshua and Mary Magdalene as, as they are considered ascended masters. So I
But
was
you know
just
what? But
curious to
maybe
see.
you're a Magi Grail holder. and that's why you channel it.
Yeah.
Maybe you walked with her before.
Yeah.
And when you
Well,
say channel, are you reading their records? Are the energy of them is coming through what you're saying?
yeah. Well, I attribute it to a connection, if you will, to my higher self energies and to my oversoul and to the energy of the creator. And that channel, if you will, allows for me to have these interactions interdimensionally with all of these other beings. I see them as guides, as helpers, if you will, along the way, you know. They're just
You're
coming
not
to.
separate. You're not separate from them, though. You are in personality, but not in uh, what's the word I'm looking for? If you're a shared oversoul, you're not separate.
No, no.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Well,
It's not separate
well,
from you.
yeah, and that's where the all that is energy comes from, right? We are all one essentially, but we are all on different levels, if you will, of our being, of our energy, of our experience. So if you just take me, for example, Raquel, I'm having a third dimensional experience in this physical body, but my oversoul, if you will, or my highest attribute or my highest energy is residing, if you will, in the 12th dimension, right? But
Right,
there are elements of my being within, you know, it could be anywhere from the fifth to the 12th dimension, and it's like you travel within these areas or these dimensions, having these experiences, right? And so it really depends on how you look at it. So within that pillar of light, if you will, right? I'm able to then interact with these beings. Like they can come to me, whether they are in the 12th dimension or in the sixth dimension, perhaps, and or even come down to the fifth dimension where I am, or in the third dimension, and interact with me in that way. And so I create this um, telephone line, if you will, through my through my pillar of light, to be able to have those connections with these higher dimensional beings, right? And so that's how I see it. And so when I don't necessarily like the word channel as well. It's
right,
like,
yeah.
it's like you're getting these impressions, if you will, but they're coming to me as telepathic messages, right? And so I can actually have a conversation with these beings and get downloads about their life and, impressions of their own experiences, whether it was in the flesh as a human being, like, for example, Yeshua and his incarnation on the earth as Jesus Christ, right? I've written an entire book about him as a light being, about him as a third dimensional being in the physical body, and then his impression after he ascended back into the light. And so he talks about his present life and, the involvement, if you will, about and his involvement in this whole ascension process and how he's assisting all the beings on the earth to ascend. And so that's just one example. But I also get impressions from Mary Magdalene, who is his divine feminine aspect, right? So there again, there's that one soul with two different aspects of the same soul, but they're all a part of the larger energy, if you will. That's all that is, right? And so even within that that structure, if you will, there's that separation in a way, which is it's subtle, but it's still a separation from the energy of the creator, right? We are all having different impressions or experiences. It's like a fractaling of that energy, right? So we're all like, fractaling out and having those experiences, but we eventually can and potentially go back to that energy, that higher energy, right? And so when
What is
you
what
said,
does
go ahead.
Yeshua say? What does Yeshua say about like the agregores that are created in his name, which I think is sad.
Well, he talks about that extensively in the book, because everything that transpired after his ascension, if you will, is inverted, right? And
Yeah.
so all the stories perhaps that are written about him in the Bible, the way that Christianity um, has the impression of what that being was is totally inverted. And at a base level, it's like he tells me, like, I don't want to be worshipped. I don't want to be considered as greater than you or anybody else. You and I are on the same level. We are both light beings. We are both star seeds. We are both human beings, if you will. I was a human being and now I'm a light being. I'm just a different aspect of my own being, right? I'm a light being and you're a physical being. So it's just a very small difference in how we perceive ourselves and how we manifest in a reality, right? And so he's completely against the aspect or the understanding of how people perceive him in this reality. It's a complete inversion of his true message, if you will, that was his incarnational purpose, to come into this world as Jesus Christ, right? It was a mission of peace, it was a mission of love, and it was a mission to show people how easy it was to connect with the higher energies of the Almighty, right? But all of that was misconstrued. His teachings were misconstrued. The very fact that his beloved Mary Magdalene is not accepted as his beloved Mary Magdalene, her name has been tarnished as, and many books still call her, a prostitute, and they have all these um, in how do I say this? These very really dark impressions of what she truly was, because she was his beloved and she still is his beloved, and they are part of the same soul. And so all of these inversions, if you will, where part of that construction of um the darkness, if you will, that still permeates this earth plane, right? That's bringing in all of these false impressions. Anyway, I don't want to hijack this interview by bringing in
And
all of this.
actually, if he was a rabbi, she was actually his wife, because to be a rabbi, you have to be married. So,
Yeah.
but they made Jesus into, some of these other pagan, and I'm not picking on paganism either, but I'm just saying when the Roman Catholic Church has decided, through the, Constantine, the what 325 AD or whatever you call that,
Hmm.
whatever that was called, and they wrote the Bible, they decided, that Jesus had to have a virgin birth, and, he couldn't be married and all that. And that's because some of those other Roman demigods weren't. I can't remember if it's with the names of them. I know there was Nimrod, but that's Babylonian. I wasn't prepared to talk. I mean, I know some of that stuff too, but I
Yeah.
wasn't prepared to go
Well,
there. So
you said that in the beginning. It's like, history is written by the victors, right? And so whatever story was, brought forth through the timelines is what we sort of inherited, right? And if you look at just the Bible in its um in its writing, it was written by the group were not in alignment with the true message of the Christ, if you will, right? Or Jesus at that time. And so you have to look at it from that perspective, right? It was written by his enemies, essentially. It's as if, if you take Donald Trump and, the the Democrats of today, and you expect history to be written in favor of the Democrats, that's not going to happen. So it's really interesting when you look at it from that perspective, right? It's like, and unfortunately, Christianity is built on that foundation, but it's a total inversion of what the true message of that being was, right? And so, yeah, I guess for me, it's become part of my work to connect with these beings and bring that energy forward. And so,
that's amazing. Yeah.
yeah, so for me, that rings true um to my soul, if you will. It in a way, it's as if I'm doing my own grid work and correcting those past wrongs, if you will, that were done to these beings, on a very large scale. Even though, it's been 2,000 years now since they incarnated on this earth, but that inversion is still happening, right? And so that
Oh, it definitely is.
that has to be corrected at some point.
And some of them, Lisa Renee, in her newsletter, I remember I resonated with the word called the archontic deception, and seeing these like some ascended master. I'm not trying to pick on them, but the fact that a lot of people that channel them, if they're not a clear channel, they're creating egregores, they're creating tulpa, and when the being may have very well moved on. But some of them are staying around because they want to get their story right. Like when I go to some graveyard at a church or something, and I hear from one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence, I can't remember which one this is now, but I remember this in Charleston, saying the reason I'm here is because I don't like what's happened in this country, and that's why I'm
Yeah.
here.
No, it's
Yeah.
very true because their energy remains here because of, you know, whatever that background was in terms of, you know, what happened to them, right? And so when that energy is, or that residual energy remains on the physical plane, it's like, yes, these beings have moved on and they're now in the light form, right? But that, whatever that event was, or whatever that, um, you know, that belief system was that kept them there is still anchored in the earth. And so it's like, you know, that's okay, don't worry about it. And so like, you know, when we do our grid work, for example, you know, we are going and we are almost uprooting all of these energies and saying, okay, this is not right, we need to correct it. And so we are going into these places and realigning those energies to the authentic energies and releasing these beings or these energies that need to be removed from these places and those circumstances, right? And so that's how I look at it, in a way of aligning and correcting the field, if you will, and releasing these energies from all of those stuck energy fields, right? Whether it's, you know, from now or 2,000 years ago.
It happened. Ponce de Leon. Ponce de Leon came to me, and I'm like, and this guy wanted help being moved on, moved up and out. And I was like, you know what? I'm not doing this. I don't even know if you're who you say you are, and I don't know enough about you, and I don't want anything to stick to me. But I've always been aware of, Ponce de Leon's the one that was looking for the fountain of youth. And in Florida, there's a lot of roads named after.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's strange. It goes back to the whole Christopher Columbus timeline, which I'm circling back around, because as we start to talk about this grid work in Charleston and why we're actually going to be doing this, and how this even connects into the UK with what we talked about yesterday. I talked about before when I went to Puerto Rico and I was at the La Garita del Diablo, the point of the Bermuda Triangle, when I saw that Charleston was connected. Because let me tell you why. Charleston, according to Ashiana Dean's work, there's something called those J seals, right? Those Jehovian seal implants that were put in after Atlantis. And there's frequency fences. When I talked about the glass ceiling, this keeps, people in a certain mind frame in their in the what's called the planetary logos, where we have a shared collective mind. And some people say, when we all get it, that's called the 100th monkey theory. Well, when we're meant to wake up to higher things, there's structures in place that keep that from happening. And it's like a hold on the people where they all think, feel, emote, and behave in the same way. And also it connects to cataclysmic events. So one of those seals is in Charleston, South Carolina. Okay, and that's the 7th one. The 4th is in the Bahamas. But the other good thing about the Bahamas, it's also part of the cathedral network, where the internal, eternal realms come in from underneath. It's not coming from the top down because everything's inverted. It's actually coming from the underground aquifers. And these people knew this. What's weird is, why are people like Al Capone, why was he drawn to Hot Springs, Arkansas, a place of great healing with that water, and wanting to run a speakeasy and the gambling and all that stuff, all these,
Wow, yeah, that's crazy when
isn't
you
that
make
crazy?
those connections. Yeah.
Yeah. So, because when I was there, I could have spent more time just in Hot Springs. The crystals are great. I love the crystals, but the water's where the healing is. And It's the same thing with these aquifers, these spring-fed aquifers, these, you know, these caves that have this blue water. Or when I go to the Bahamas, if you look on Google Map, you will see that the water's blue in a very certain area. And I happen to be very, you know, fortunate, blessed to go on a few cruises and go experience this water. When I went on the Carnival cruise recently with my husband, even the Margaritaville cruise, and I didn't even know why I was going there, but now it makes sense because it's an important area as far as like a nursery of, you know, creativity. And especially with the timelines changes and the weather patterns changing, because isn't it interesting what's happened with the Gulf of Mexico? You know, Stargate 2, which is that Sarasota, that's also connected to the Bermuda Triangle. That Stargate 2. It's also connected to the UK Stonehenge. You got the 2 in Sarasota, Siesta Key, the 11 in Stonehenge. That's all part of the Atlantis. The UK area north and into the North Sea is actually called Lohas Atlantis, which ties into the whole Arthur, Camelot, Avalon, the Knights of the Round Table, all that stuff. And you probably know more about that than me because you brought that forward. But my piece with that, I've been working on that whole Arthur piece for years. I really feel connected to that whole timeline of the Arthurian, you know, legend of, you know, France, going to, you know, places like Rennes-le-Chateau. That's also Mary Magdalene. If you ever follow William Henry's work, if you're familiar with William Henry, he's made a lot of trips, not only to Egypt, but to Rennes-le-Chateau in France. So all these dots are connected. I might be going all over the place, but trying to make it cohesive where back to Charleston and what we're clearing there with these shots and how it's tied to that 666 wormhole. Let me give you what was very interesting is when we were in Edisto, when Ron found the property, it turns out that as soon as we got there, the way I knew it was part of the 666 wormhole is that Elon Musk shot, and the Falcon Phoenix wormhole, Elon Musk shot his rocket up called the Falcon something, the Falcon 9. And that was like right after you know, we went there, and I'm like, isn't this interesting? And then what also happened at our house in Edisto is he shot up his Starlink satellites, and our friends thought that they were UFOs. It looked like a UFO invasion, but I knew that what it was.
Wow,
But
synchronicities, hey? Yeah, that's amazing.
but that the Charleston and what's going on, I don't know. When I got off the call yesterday, I don't know if we got to talk about this, but Charleston was actually called Charlestown, named after a previous King Charles. And the whole thing with people wanting to escape Great Britain and coming to the America, which is now the US, because they were, you know, held hostage with that government. And you had a bunch of patriots and stuff, the sons of, I can't think of what the name of it is now, so I just lost it. But that whole piece is sort of repeating, and that oppression that that England did at that time to other countries now is what's flipped, and it was what's happening there as Arthur is rising.
Are you going to be doing that gridwork session tomorrow?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, well, I'll be there too, so it should be fun. But yeah, I just wanted to see if you could make any connection with that. You talked about the Bermuda Triangle and Mount Shasta, and in one of Indy's recent gridworks, we connected the dot to Calgary in Canada. So there was like this triangular shape that connected those three areas. What in your mind is happening in terms of the Canadian landscape?
I know I don't look at it that much, but I know the Michael Mary lines run through there. I've been told that. I remember that. I'm trying to remember exactly where. When I've spent time in Canada myself, I've been in British Columbia. So I've been to Vancouver and I've been to Victoria. And I have also been to Niagara Falls. I haven't been to Alberta or any of the other countries. Where are you in
I'm in
British Columbia?
BC. Yeah, I'm just
Yeah,
outside of Vancouver. Yeah.
yeah, beautiful, beautiful. I went to Mount Baker years ago and I did that hike. That was
Nice.
amazing.
Yeah.
And I remember a zoo when I went there that was just, you could drive through it and it was gorgeous. And I remember, like the Olympic Peninsula. And I mean, I have a feeling one day I will probably go back there because I really feel a call to do an Alaska cruise.
Oh,
And it would stop in, I think in British Columbia somewhere, probably stops in Vancouver.
so in terms of the grid line that runs through here, you don't see anything from your perspective at the moment?
I'd have to actually look. I haven't
Okay.
really looked at it. I'm not feeling anything necessarily right now, but I am seeing the whole thing with the Gulf of America, Gulf
Yeah.
of Mexico, and why the name was changed. Like I said, I don't actively always look, but sometimes when I'm on location or things happen, it just comes to me, this is why. But maybe now that we've talked about it, it will come to me why. It's just not on my radar right now, but Greenland is on my radar. I
Okay.
know why Greenland, as far as what they want and how the whole thing was all connected at one time. I could see that Canada is part of America, as Mexico is part of America, as Central and South America is all one. But it was all Pangea, right?
Yeah.
Maybe you've
Yeah.
channeled that where it was all connected.
Well, I'm aware of it peripherally, but I haven't gone into it in depth. Yeah. So it was all like one continent, right? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's interesting.
yeah.
Well, Missy, this has been fascinating. I'm so glad we had this chat. Um, was there anything else you wanted to talk about?
Well, let's see. The thing that we're doing April 11th through the 13th,
And
I
this is
can give you
Charleston, right?
yeah, I
Yeah.
can give that to you for the show notes. We can put that
Sure,
in
yeah,
the
we can
show
do that.
notes,
Yeah.
you
No,
know.
that would be awesome. Yeah, and I would for the viewers, I would encourage you guys to go and check out Indy's work and Missy's work. They're going to be doing Charleston in that um, April, I guess the dates that Missy just talked about. So
April
yeah,
11th through the 13th.
yeah, it would be really great if you guys can go and check that out because I think the registrations are still open and it's I think you're doing like a whole tour of the place as well too, aren't you, Missy?
Well, not a whole tour of the whole of Charleston, but of the key points of the French Quarter and the oldest part of Charleston, which is like the Provost Dungeon, of course, where the Civil War shots were fired, but anything that's really old, because Charleston was like the fourth wealthiest city in the United States, as well as one of the oldest. It was very important, and it was strategic as far as a port trading, with the Bahamas and other places. It was just the where it was. I mean, slavery is a terrible thing, but I can even see that, the reasons the slaves were sold was because they were a commodity, because Africa didn't have anything to trade. So they gave their own people, the ones that were, I guess, in trouble. And that was the first thing, was the pickup, which the slaves, and then the slaves were brought to America to grow the rice in South Carolina, the cotton, and then there was another indigo that they made dye out of. And then after that product was made, then the third round of that trip was going to sell it in Europe. And then even when slavery was over, there was slaves that stayed, and it's a horrible thing. But even when I was in the slave museum, I was hearing them say it actually, in a way, they agreed to it. It had to be this way to further the world to what it is now, because that was part of like what the way things were built, which is terrible. And then I was seeing that we were all slaves to a degree, because we've all had to work, and it's just varying degrees of consumptive modeling of being used as currency and as a
Hmm.
resource,
Hmm.
for the system, the
Yeah,
matrix.
yeah. Well, we have to collapse these systems, right? And that's what we're
Yeah.
working at. So we're doing it like one grid at a time, or one city at a time, or one stargate at a time. And so it's amazing to to discover these things as we move forward, and with people like you who are able to give us that um, colorful experience, if you will, of bringing in your own history and your background to these events. It's truly quite amazing. So yeah, I would encourage anybody who might be interested in taking part in this mission to connect with Indigo Angel 222 and Missy, and take part in this Gridwork boots on the ground mission with them. It's truly fascinating. So Missy, I thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. To my viewers, give us a like on this video, and
Yes.
help us out with the channel. Namaste, everybody. Thank you for tuning in.
Namaste. Thank you.